maybe just start by explaining like what you do in your words and maybe how you got into that.
So I'm an end of life guide. Basically, I help people navigate situations and conversations that most of us don't know how to do. Some people call it death doulas, end of life guide. I'm kind of comfortable with whatever. So basically, I help folks prepare for the end of their life, and we're all, gonna have that at some point. We just don't know
Hmm.
when. So a lot of what I do is help people think through what they want at the end of their life and have those conversations, basically helping people build that muscle to think about things, what kind of environment do you want? What kind of decisions do you want? Who should make those if you aren't able to? And then
Hmm.
how do we sort of work with other folks? Like I'm not a doctor and I'm not a lawyer, but I work with both of those folks. So, like I can't write a legal will for you, but I can help think through things in a way where a lawyer may not. I'm not a doctor, but I can help think through what are these other measures of comfort that might help you continue to live, and how do I sort of interface with those. Sort of in some ways it's sort of like a project manager. I'm not
Hmm.
really actively doing things to provide care to folks, but really helping create space and information and helping people make the best decisions for themselves and for their loved ones.
When my mom was sick, we worked with a death doula who came to the house quite often, helped facilitate conversations with the family. And then she was also kind of very present in the last few weeks to few days of my mom's life. And then was
Mhm.
there when my mom died, was there a few days afterwards. Is that also what you are doing, or are you more kind of hands off?
It depends, right? It depends on what the person wants. Some people only come to me because they want to do documents. They want to do sort of their advanced care planning, which is a very broad term that includes like getting their healthcare proxy, trust, will, any sort of like navigating end of life conversations or finding resources on more information. And some people might want more of that full support, spending a lot of time doing sort of the bedside vigil. A lot, I would say, currently more of my clients are more on the advanced care planning side than sort of the, for lack of better words, like the full service doula.
Hmm.
Um, but have can comfortable with all aspects of it.
Okay. And I know on your website you also offer some services for help and support with the caregivers. Can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah. So I was my mom. I got into this work from personal experience. I was my mom's caregiver at the end of her life, and I realized firsthand how hard it is, which I realize is something sort of silly to say because it is incredibly difficult. It's um, you're just doing a lot, and you usually have no idea what you're doing. It's sort of very similar to what I imagine a new parent is going through, where they don't really know what to do
Mm.
and people want to help, but nobody really knows what to do and you don't know what to ask. So caregiver respite care is sort of where I come in and I'll sort of like, for lack of better words, babysit the person who is
Mm.
dying and allow the caregiver to take a nap, go get groceries, whatever. I don't administer medications, and I don't do a lot of personal care, but I spend time with a person. I can visit with them or sit quietly with them and just make sure they're okay. And if anything happens, which is very uncommon, most of the time everything is very fine and the person's just sleeping or happy with just being quiet with me, I can always call the primary caregiver and be like, hey, you need to come home, or hey, you need this. But usually just gives somebody a chance to remember that they're a person and to take care of
Hmm.
their own needs. And that can just be, again, like a shower, a nap, a phone call with a friend without having to worry about their person. Because
Hmm.
usually, especially as people get closer to the end of their life, the family members want to be there 24/7, right? People want to
Hmm.
be there. They want to make sure that everything's okay. They don't want that person to ever feel alone, which is exhausting. It's exhausting to constantly have somebody in front of you, to sort of always put somebody's needs in front of yours. And so I sort of help be that presence and give somebody a little bit of space to be themselves.
Okay. That reminded me of when my mom was sick, she was on a lot of medication, and some of the medications made her a bit like confused and not able to remember certain things. And one time I was on a work trip and my mom called me like really distraught and stressed out because my dad had left, and my dad was her primary caretaker. And he had left, and she thought that it had been like 5 to 7 hours. She was like, he's never coming back. I'm stuck
Mhm.
here. I can't take care of myself. And she was like panicked. And I was kind of like, that seems very unusual. Like, I don't think my dad would ever do that,
Yeah.
but maybe something happened. So I call him and I'm like, hey, what's going on? Like, and he was like, oh, I just went to the gym. I've been gone 30 minutes. And that's when I realized, like, okay, like this medication is like clearly making her unable to like see reality and understand what's going
Mhm.
on. So I could see how having someone like you come and just be there and help calm her down and explain, like, oh, it's only actually been 30 minutes. Like, I'm here. You're not alone. Could be
Mhm.
really valuable for the patient, but also the person like my dad who probably just wanted a little 30-minute break.
Yeah.
Hey, you mentioned advanced planning. I have on my list here to talk to you about like creating a living will, advanced directives, and then choosing your healthcare proxy. So I know that's kind of a lot of things at once. I think for somebody who is not involved at all in this field, like these words don't really have much meaning. So can
Mhm.
you in your world explain what that means to you and what that means to people who are new to it?
Yeah, yeah. So what I typically work with folks on when I say advanced directives, it's kind of an umbrella term, and it usually involves a couple of different areas. So one is a healthcare proxy. It could be called a medical power of attorney, and this is where you sort of where you decide who will make decisions for you when you are no longer able to make decisions for yourself. So say you get in a car accident and you can't make decisions for yourself. That's what happens. Or if your illness reaches a point where you can't make decisions for yourself, somebody else will if you're unable to speak. And so what are those things you want? Helping folks get clear on like what their values are, who those people are to make decisions, um, and just thinking through and helping document it, and then also making sure that that information gets communicated to those decision makers. So that's sort
Mm-hmm.
of one area. Another area is a living will, and this is not the healthcare proxy and the living will are both they're legal documents, but you don't need a lawyer for them
Okay.
in most states. In some states, you do need one to execute it, but most of them you just need a couple of witnesses. And so the living will more explains like what you want after you die, how you want to be treated towards the end of your life. It's more of those things that are kind of squishy. So I'd like to really talk with people to really sort of get at the heart of how do they make decisions? What are their core values? And sort of help bring that out because I think that's much more helpful for people as they're figuring out what to do, right? Like it's impossible to come up with every scenario and what you would want done in those scenarios, but it's like, okay, I know that, you know, say I'm Emily's healthcare proxy is like I know Emily cares deeply about her autonomy and being alone and having, her animal and pet and plants nearby. And that's what brings her
Mm-hmm.
help, comfort and health. And so how do I bring those elements in? Does she want everything thrown at her or does she not? And so I was thinking through that. And then there's like
Mm-hmm.
trust and will, which you do need a lawyer for. Please use a lawyer. And they're the ones who really write down everything and they will do, and also like a trust. So they'll take care of the like the legal side, which again is I'm not a lawyer. Please don't ask me to be one. um, but so I really help people sort of, I spend a lot more time going through scenarios and thinking through things through with people and really documenting what I think are like their core values and how they make decisions and helping simplify that information as easily as possible so
Mm-hmm.
that they can get clarity and then they can communicate with their people. And
Okay.
then sometimes there's also another document that's like it is releasing HIPAA information. And so that is, for example, if somebody has a diagnosis and they want somebody to help them make decisions, so they
Mm-hmm.
still have the capacity to make decisions. So that healthcare power of attorney hasn't kicked in yet because they're still cognizant, but they might like, say if I had cancer and I wanted my best friend to come with me because they understand things, they can help me make sense and help me be that, then you would have a HIPAA release basically saying that like this person has access to your medical information, um, and they can help you make decisions even though you are fully capable of still making decisions on your own.
Hmm. Okay. So the healthcare proxy or medical POA, power of
Hmm.
attorney, essentially is kicking in when you're no longer able to make decisions on for yourself.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. And any advice or thoughts that people should think about when they're trying to figure out who they should select for their healthcare proxy medical POA?
Yeah. So most people understandably typically go to whoever they're closest with, which might be, a partner or a spouse or something, which still might be the right person. But I think it's also important to think about who's really good in a stressful situation. Who is those friends
Hmm.
who like could very quickly make sense in chaos and are kind of the go-to person, and somebody who also is like not afraid to speak up. Like if, somebody doesn't want everything done to save their life, if they don't ever want feeding tubes, they don't want CPR,
Hmm.
who can they trust that will stand up to a doctor and be like, no, this is not what they want? Because
Hmm.
most people, understandably, defer to other authority figures such as doctors, or family members. And so this person might have to stand up to people and it might be uncomfortable. So somebody who can be strong and can be a good advocate and understands what you want. And so sometimes
Hmm.
this is not necessarily your partner, and maybe your partner or your loved one, it could be a gift to not have them be your POA because it'll allow
Yeah.
them to just spend time with you and be present with you and then not have to sort of wear this other hat. So
Hmm.
it really, I guess, just depends. But I think just
Hmm.
thinking through who's really good in a situation, who's a strong advocate, and who can like be the decisive one.
Hmm.
And also somebody who's also very good at communicating because they're going to have to talk about these decisions, like why they're making it. Like, listen, I know that, especially most of the time it's parents and friends don't always see eye to eye on how they want treatment for somebody, right?
Hmm.
And so somebody who can help explain, like, this is why I make the decision, this is what they would want. We've talked about this before. And again, please talk to your people.
Yes.
Please talk to your people. Having things written down is very helpful, but it is not, nobody wants to be like, oh no, I'm suddenly a medical power of attorney because somebody got in a car accident and I have no idea what they want. Let me go look at this document. Like, oh my gosh, that is a terrible scenario.
Yeah. And as far as like, let's say I want to appoint my brother as my medical POA, what do I need to do to make that happen? Like, because if I'm incapacitated, I'm not going to be able to tell people that. So, what should I do to make that real?
So you have all this paperwork done ahead of time. This is just part of good planning. Like, you have your will done even though you're not dead.
Hmm.
And so having all of these things written and shared with them. So like once you fill out your power of attorney paperwork, and sometimes it's very specific documents based on your state, and sometimes it's very, as long as two people notarize it and it has or people signed and witness, that's fine.
Okay.
um, caring caringinfo.com, I think is what it is, has like a list of state by state resources, which is really helpful. But you could also just Google like medical power of attorney New York or whatever your state is.
Okay. Okay.
So you have this written down, you've had the conversation with, say, your brother about what you want, and then you make sure when you have the executed copy that he has it.
Okay.
Ideally, your doctor would have it as well. And then I also recommend keeping it some places in your house that are like not locked, where somebody could find it. Maybe in your glove compartment of your car if you drive, because you
Mm.
might need it in that sort of event. So having it around, because it doesn't have a lot of private sensitive information, like it's not having your credit card or your social security number, it just has sort of contact information for you and your person with some directions.
Okay.
So that way when they know to notify your brother, he's also like, I'm the power of attorney, see, and he can have the
Hmm.
piece of paper that shows them.
Okay. Speaking of forms, what about DNR, do not resuscitate? forms. Like, what is that in simple terms? I think this is something that most people kind of have a general understanding of what it is. Same with HIPAA form, same with organ donation. But just in case, what is it? How do you usually get one?
Yeah. So DNRs, or do not resuscitate, are basically forms that just say, if at the end of my life I'm ready to go, please don't perform CPR. It's usually a pretty, you could have it as part of your advanced care plan. There's also POST or MOST, which is like physician order of life saving treatment or medical order of life saving treatment. And these are forms that are usually incredibly brightly colored, and usually you put them on your refrigerator. Most
Mm.
emergency professionals know to sort of like look at their fridge, especially if you're on hospice or have some sort of illness where you think you may not want this, or you're just a certain stage in life and expect that
Mm-hmm.
maybe things may be winding down. And basically, these just say, I don't want CPR, and like I would rather die naturally. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't want any artificial liquids or foods. And again, this is, I think the important thing on these documents, which I haven't mentioned before, is like they change. Like they can change. As you
Mm-hmm.
will grow and evolve and age, so will these. And so it's really important to like revisit these decisions. Because right now, for me personally, like I want CPR. Like if
Mm-hmm.
something happens to me, please give me everything you can to help make, because I'm relatively young and healthy. But if I'm 85, I might feel very differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially as my body gets frailer. And it is, CPR is wonderful and obviously saves many lives, but it's also extremely violent, and it
Mm-hmm.
often will break many bones. And so if I'm an 85-year-old person, I probably don't want to have to go through that. And if, even if they're successful and save my life, they'll then have to deal with like broken ribs and recovering from that. That's not something I
Mm-hmm.
want. So I think it's also important
Mm-hmm.
to know that it's okay to say no to some of this, and it's okay to say yes. It's also okay to change your mind over time and just update these forms.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Okay.
not a one and done, but you should do it at least once.
Yes. um, and do you usually recommend people fill out their organ and tissue donation registration forms as well when they're doing the planning with you?
Yeah, usually I'll talk about that with them. It's like, do you want to be an organ donor, tissue donor, whole body donor? And again, I think it's, you know, I'm not there to say, yes, you should, or no, you shouldn't, but just to sort of
Mm-hmm.
provide information to people and let them make their own decisions. Again, there's pluses and minuses to everything. And I think organ donation is wonderful and it's so life saving. And it can be such a gift to people, but it can also have, it can be hard for some people, um, like if somebody is nearing the end of their life and they decide they want to donate organs and tissues, they might have more life sustaining treatment or prolonged life via tubes and things until they find the right match,
Mm-hmm.
which if somebody doesn't want, that is again is like where this healthcare proxy comes in. Like, is organ donation more important to them than not having life sustaining treatment? So sort of having somebody weigh those things.
Mm-hmm.
um, and like, well, you likely won't have the option to die at home, because if you donate organs and tissues, they need them very quickly. And so
Mm-hmm.
like you don't get that time with your family, which is also fine and wonderful, but just making sure people understand all of the sort of pros and cons, and then what do they want, what's right for them,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that their family understands all of this as well.
Yeah. I think that's a good point to bring up because I feel like, at least, I mean, I'm also relatively young. And when I've thought of organ donation, it's like, oh, I get a little heart on my license. That's cute. And I'm going to do something great. But I never thought about, if I want to die at home, that probably means I'm not really able to donate my organs. If I don't want to be on life support, that probably means I can't donate my organs. So, like, yeah, sitting down and like thinking about those things and writing down what's more important to you will help your healthcare proxy. Because
Yeah.
imagine being your best friend and having to like make that difficult decision, like without any insight into what the person really wanted. So,
And also, right, like if if it's somewhat unexpected that somebody is nearing the end of their life, they were normal, healthy, they got in some sort of accident or something happened, and then all of a sudden somebody in the hospital is like, "Hey, we need you to decide right now. Do you want to donate their eyes, their liver, it's just
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, like that's a really stressful thing to put
Yeah.
on your loved ones who are grieving you and in a very delicate state. So having these conversations ahead of time so they can feel comfortable and like know what to do. And also I I feel for families that are just thrust into this and they're like, just take what you need. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, and nobody wants to make those decisions in that state. So I think that's also
Mhm.
like, again, this part of the building the muscle around like having these conversations that like a lot of people are like, oh, it's so depressing to think about. I honestly don't find it depressing. Like, while it is emotional,
Mhm.
100%, very emotional, I also find it very creative and sort of like exploratory and curious and like learning deeply about yourselves. But then also like I find it forges deeper relationships with the people when you're telling them what you want and explaining why. I feel
Mhm.
like it really helps deepen a relationship. So I don't, well, I understand people's initial reaction being like, ooh, this is scary and this is sad and I don't want to talk about it. It's like, well, ignoring a problem has never solved it. Trust me, I've tried.
Yes.
So it's like, how do we just lean into the discomfort and then like all muscles, like it just gets easier the more you talk about it, and then it'll just be better at the end for everybody. And like the goal
Mhm.
for me is I want my end of life to be as smooth as possible for those around me, where they don't have to feel guilty that they made the wrong decision, they didn't do something soon enough, they didn't know what I wanted, and they hope they made the right decision. Like I want to be clear, like here's what I want, here's what I don't, and also like here's what I don't care about, and that's up to you.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah,
very important.
I think that's a really good point that I started bringing up too when I make videos is this idea of a lot of people are like, I don't really care what happens to me when I die because I'll be dead. And I'm like, that's fine. But documenting that is still way more helpful to people than not saying that because then they're going to be like, well, what would they have wanted? I don't know. But if they know you don't care, then it's like, okay, I'll just make the decision based on what I want as the person who's
Mhm.
planning it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Especially like people have so many thoughts and feelings about like funerals are a high stakes event, right? Like people want to
Hmm.
like spend a lot of money and make it a wonderful affair and a way to honor a person, but it's like it's typically for those who are still living, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm dead.
Hmm.
I don't care what you do with me. Like I just know here's where I want to end up. Like it's
Yeah.
either in the ground or it's not. And that's like really what, do I care about what music is played? No. Some people do, and that's fine.
Hmm.
But I think it's also just like plan ahead. I actually just
Yeah.
listened to the audiobook of Leslie Jones, which is hilarious. But she has dealt with a lot of death in her life of her parents and her brother. And she just keeps being like, y'all, please plan.
Yes.
This is just like awful. And, especially like get a life insurance policy. She's like, at the very least, it'll pay for the funeral. She's like, it's
Hmm.
$20 a month. Just do it. It doesn't matter. But it's just wonderful to just sort of hear like regular people like this happens to all of us. We're all gonna have to navigate it.
Hmm.
That was a very random tangent.
No, but I think I'll link. It was a book or a podcast, you said.
It was her book, and it's
Yeah.
like obviously she's hilarious,
Yeah.
but it's like 20 hours long. Like,
Yeah.
but she has some really wonderful insights, and I just like, but yeah, that was one of them where she was just like yelling about like I don't want to have to plan another funeral. Like I don't care. Like she's like She's like, "I know it's for me and I don't care, so I don't wanna have a funeral." And, like, they didn't say
Yeah.
they wanted one, so we're not having one, so that's that. Haunt me if you want.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
Um, okay. My last topic that I had written down to discuss is around hospice and palliative care. I think there can be a lot of confusion about what they are, what it means. Um, I know you've had experience with it. I have as well. So I just wanted to kind of open discussion, like whatever you think is helpful for people to maybe understand the difference between the two, understand like you can graduate from hospice, which is such an odd way of saying things.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
I think number one, the misconception that hurts my heart the most is people thinking hospice is something to be avoided until the very last minute. That like
mhm,
it's not going to make you die faster. I promise it's not going to make you die faster. Like they nobody is trying to speed things along. That's not what morphine does. But I think it has that conception. So palliative care is providing comfort to somebody, right? Like it's focusing on symptom management, making things better. So if you, for example, have cancer and you're receiving chemotherapy and the side effects are awful and they are like diminishing your quality of life, you might get a referral for a palliative care specialist who will help provide care to offset some of those treatments. So like, an example could be like sometimes people get anemia from
mhm,
chemotherapy because it's so hard on their system. And so they might recommend like a blood transfusion or some other medication that will help make it easier for you to sustain receiving these treatments.
mhm,
And so they work with your doctor or oncologist or whatever it is to provide comfort and make sure you still have a decent quality of life as you're going through curative treatment.
mhm,
And so when hospice, the difference between palliative and hospice care, the main difference is hospice no longer has that curative element to it. It's sort of, okay, we're just going to allow the body to die in its natural way, right? Like where the body's no longer, either the body doesn't want and is not responding to treatment anymore. Again, I'm using cancer sort of as my lens,
mhm,
or the person just doesn't want to endure more treatment, right?
mhm,
Like, and they're accepting that, like, okay, I'm just going to allow this disease to take its course,
mhm,
but I still want to be comfortable, right? Like, I still want to not experience pain or anxiety. And so that's where hospice comes in. And so hospice and palliative care both have a more holistic approach of providing support. So they both have, again, medical staff who are making sure that you have the medication you need to feel comfortable and pain free, but they also provide emotional and spiritual support. So they usually have spiritual care counselors, and you don't necessarily have to be a religious person to benefit from this. Um, if you are, that's great. And they usually have a variety of different faiths that will provide care. They also have social workers, and then they often have volunteers who can provide some sort of social support. And they're
okay,
both wonderful. But yeah, so hospice is usually when people stop any curative treatment. If you break your leg and you're in hospice, you can still get treated for your broken leg, right? Like,
mhm,
but they're not going to treat, again, assuming you, in the scenario you have cancer, they're not going to force chemotherapy on you, but they're going to make sure
mhm,
that you're comfortable and that you are living a life that is what you consider good, right? Like, what is that? Like, to make sure you're not in pain, you have supplies you need. You'll have nurses come if you're at home or in a facility, or figuring out what those are and having a social worker to help navigate, like, okay, maybe at home isn't the right place for you. How do we
mhm,
get you in a spot? Or the other thing that's really wonderful about hospice that I think is very underutilized is they also offer respite care. So sometimes if somebody is at home on hospice, um, typically hospice kicks in when they think somebody will live 6 months or less
mhm,
without curative treatment. And it's
okay,
sort of reevaluated. And that's sort of sometimes people can live for many years while in a hospice program because, like, they're just sort of beating the odds. And that can be exhausting for caregivers, right? Like they thought,
mhm,
okay, I'm only doing this for a couple of weeks. And it's like 2 years later, they're like, I am tired.
mhm,
I need a break. And so usually what that respite will look like is moving the patient into a facility for a few days where they can receive all the medical care, and the caregiver can just have a few days to themselves to rest and restore. And it's
mhm,
really can be a very wonderful thing. And of course, Some people don't want it for whatever reason, but that's another thing they offer. Um, and yes, sometimes people graduate, right? Or somehow, while they're not receiving curative treatment, they're still maintaining, and hospice is realizing like they're actually not in a lot of pain and they don't need our services. And
Mhm.
like famously, Jimmy Carter graduated, I think, like 3 or 4 times and was on hospice in a hospice program for many years. Like that's just how it goes. And sometimes it's very fast. What
Mhm.
hurts my heart the most is when people are like, I don't want to start this. I can tell my person is very close to dying. Like statistically, people come on hospice very late when they're
Mhm.
kind of almost to the almost already at the active dying stage, and there's not a lot that is actually can be done to provide comfort
Mhm.
because getting the medicines right and make sure that they're sort of continuously administered to keep somebody at a comfortable level takes some time. And so
Mhm.
sometimes people wait until the very end and they're like, okay, now we need hospice. Like, well, it's awful to say, but like they can't just come in and like, boop, it's all better.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just important for people to realize like they're not going to kill your person. They're just there to focus on make sure that they're comfortable and happy and helping support them as like holistically as possible, and also like helping the caregiver manage their system so they're easier to care for.
Mhm. And also, I think important to note that hospice doesn't mean that there's somebody who's like moving into your house and taking over
Yes.
full care. Like it's often maybe like a couple times a week they're coming by for an hour or two and just like helping with a few things. Anything
Yes.
else you want to add to that?
Yes. That was so I was a caregiver for my mom at the end of her life, and like we knew she had had cancer, and like we knew we were all ready for hospice. And so I was like, well, she lived in a different state than I did. So I was like, well, I'll just stay with mom for, while she's on hospice, but it'll be fine. Like, I'll still work remote and, hospice will be there, but I'll just kind of like be doing my thing while they take care of mom.
Mhm.
Boy, was I surprised. They were wonderful. This is not like throwing shade at them, but just they're limited in what they provide. And so a nurse would come by once a week to check on her, and we would have a home health aide come in, I think twice a week to bathe her and help her. And I was just like, what do you mean I'm here for the rest of it? What do you mean?
Mhm.
And they were, and then again, this is not like throwing shade to them. They were wonderful and very helpful, but I just was uninformed about what to expect.
Mhm.
um, and then as she got closer to dying, like they came more frequently, like usually towards the end, like they were there every day checking on her and helping adjust her medications and everything. They have like a 24-hour hotline in case anything happens. And I was like, whoa, what do I do? And they were always
Mhm.
very helpful and could send somebody in an emergency. But yes, it is, especially if you're at home, like they're not moving in with you, which was
Mhm.
probably very naive on my part, but I also don't think I was alone in thinking that.
No, I don't think so either. Um, they do, though, at least in our experience, they can provide lots of equipment, like medical
Mm-hmm.
beds that you would have in the hospital. We had like portable toilets, we had walkers, wheelchairs. So that part was helpful for sure, as like my mom's health varied and what she was able to do versus not. But yeah, definitely not there full time.
No, but yeah, they do. They provide a lot of stuff, and they provide a lot of equipment, and just things that. One thing that was very hard for me, and this is, I think, where I've provided value for other people, I hope, is I remember the hospice team was always loving, like, well, what questions do you have? I'm like, honestly, I have no idea. Like, what questions
Yeah.
should I have?
Hmm.
And it's just like, as somebody who hadn't been through it before, like, I don't know what to ask. I don't know what to expect. And I'm trying to understand what's happening and how to provide great care, but like, I don't know.
Hmm.
And they gave, the hospice I worked for had their version of uh, the Blue Book. Barbara Carnes is a wonderful former hospice nurse, and she writes these wonderful books that are like written at like a third grade level, which is perfect because your brain is completely fried and you can't understand information. And it really sort of
Hmm.
explains what the stages of dying look like and what to expect and how to provide comfort in those. And let me tell you, I read that thing like multiple times a day, being like, where are we? What do I do? And then try to like figure out, like, talk to the hospice. I think we're here. Is this where we are? And because like I don't really know how much time your mom has left. Like, I'm not a magician, but yes, I think we're in like the last week or so. I'm like, oh
Mhm.
God, I thought we had 6 months. But it is helpful
Yeah.
to have somebody tell you, like, no, we're getting close.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I also remember always wanting to know like, well, how much time do we have? And they're like, I can't answer that. And I'm like, what
Yeah.
do you mean you can't answer this? This is your job.
Yeah.
Um, the Blue Book, is that something that I is free for people? Can they get it online? Can they order it somewhere? I think maybe people might be interested in that, depending on what
Yeah,
they're in.
it's not free, but it's very affordable. I don't remember how much. I want to say it's like $3.
Okay.
And it's on Barbara Karn's website. Of course, like I'm sure it's on Amazon, other things. And most hospice agencies have some version of it, which is very similar information, just maybe worded slightly differently, that they give patients. I know when I've worked with hospice and palliative care teams, they usually provide patients with a similar version of it. But I can send you a link if you want to link it. But it's, I think, gone from my site. But
Okay.
it's sort of
I think
referred
you
to as the
link.
little blue book of hospice because it has a blue
Yeah.
cover.
I think you sent it to me recently, the link for it, but I will definitely link it in the description of this episode.
Mhm.
I want to like promote your what you're doing as well. Like you're in Brooklyn
Mhm.
doing this, and can people work with you if they aren't living near where you are, or is it specifically for people nearby?
Nope. No, a lot of this can be done. I mean, we've all learned you can build relationships virtually. So I work with folks virtually, and of course, folks in New York um, as well. Obviously, like I'm not going to fly out to California to sit bedside with somebody, for
Hmm.
example. I mean, unless you pay me a lot of money, but like real talk, that's not going to happen. But I'm happy to provide video calls to family members or individuals who just want a lot of support or someone to call and provide that.
Hmm.
So yes, especially the advanced care planning definitely can be done virtually,
Hmm.
as you can attest.
Yes, I've done it. Great
um,
experience. Recommend.
yeah, yeah. But so it can be done virtually. And then some things are more like I'm not doing respite care for folks who are, that's not a virtual service, but most of
Mhm.
the planning side of things, it can be done virtually.
Okay. I will link your website and your Instagram. Thanks. Appreciate you doing this.
No, it was fun. And it was good to see you.